Welcome to the Story of Us, Women Design Voices on the Pleasure and Power of Rising Together. My name is Crystal Williams. I am the president of Rhode Island School of Design, and I am thrilled to be here. I will, in just a moment, introduce our panelists, but before I do that, I want to acknowledge a few people. I want to acknowledge Jen Roberts, who is the CEO of Design Miami. I want to acknowledge Anna Karnick, who is the editor-in-chief and curatorial director of Design Miami. I want to also acknowledge Sarah Fitzmaurice of Fitz & Co. And now I will introduce our panelists, who I will acknowledge. Little bits of bio on everybody. And so I'm actually not gonna read this in alpha order. I'm gonna read it in order of stage left to stage right. So, Dominique Petit-Frère, co-founder of Limbo Accra. Dominique is the co-founder of Limbo Accra, an architecture-infused spatial design practice founded in 2018 in Accra, Ghana. She is a design strategist working in collaboration with architects, designers, and artists by connecting with places, institutions, and people through long-term transdisciplinary networks to discover intuitive and inventive spatial solutions that make the most out of our existing resources. Dominique, thank you for being here. Trevyn McGowan, co-founder of Southern Guild. By the way, I saw two Southern Guild representations here, one here, just across the way, and one in Untitled. Wonderful, congratulations. Yeah. So Southern Guild was established in 2008 by Trevyn and Julian McGowan. It represents contemporary artists from Africa and its diaspora. With a focus on Africa's rich tradition of utilitarian and ritualistic art, the Galleries program furthers the continent's contributions to global art movements. Southern Guild's artists explore the preservation of culture, spirituality, identity, ancestral knowledge, and ecology within our current landscape. Thank you for being here. Dejha Carrington is co-founder of Commissioner. Dejha is an independent curator whose work focuses on supporting artists and building models for access in the arts. In addition to running Commissioner, a collaborative program that brings together emerging collectors and artists in cities, she consults on social impact initiatives and teaches at the New World School of the Arts. Carrington serves as an advisory committee member of the Miami-Dade Art in Public Places and New York University's Center for Black Visual Culture. She is Miami-based. Cristina Grajales, did I get it? Yes, I feel happy about that. Is founder of the Cristina Grajales Gallery. Born in Colombia, she came to the US as a student in the late 70s. Following an early job in a Soho art gallery, she spent a decade as director of the 1950 Gallery, New York's preeminent source of post-war European design, where she introduced a new generation of collectors to masters. In 2001, Grajales opened her gallery and design advisory business and celebrated its 20th anniversary in 2021. She continues to advise global collectors on acquisitions and sales, sits on the board of arts organizations Creative Time, and is the founder of the, quote, Dialogues with Design Legends, that's the title of it, lecture series at the 92nd Street Y. I also want to just point out that Cristina also has representation just if you go, I think, straight down this primary aisle. And for those of you who are going to walk out, I will call your attention to, there is an incredible rug that is hand embroidered that she can talk more about later. Say it again?
It's called the Garden of the Americas.
Yes, Garden of the Americas. So I commend it to you. And finally, last but not least, she likes that she's going last with the Appleton. I'm usually always last with Williams, and she's always first with A, so we inverted that. This is Lora Appleton, founder of Female Design Council and Kinder Modern Gallery. So Lora is an action-oriented leader. Well, that is true. but also Design Council is also an action-oriented leadership organization dedicated to supporting women in the field of design, art, and architecture. Lora has earned awards and recognitions in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Surface, Design, Vogue, Cultured, Elle Decor, Wallpaper, and more. She serves on New York City Design Steering Committee and is a board of trustee member at the Blue School in Manhattan and is just all around fabulous. So welcome to the conversation. I want to just start off by saying it's a real privilege for me to speak about rising together with such a diverse group of women. Not only does this group of leaders represent cross-sector heterogeneity, but they also represent national, cultural, generational, and racial diversity among many other types of identities. And so I expect our conversation, while probably too brief, to be wide-ranging and one in which the definitions that we are using in unearthing will vary, right? Because we are so culturally diverse. My hope is that that breadth of vision and experience that they represent, from that will emerge ways of thinking about defining rising together in new and sort of interesting ways. So let's start with that phrase, rising together, which in the context of change, which is implied in the overall title of the story of us rising together, calls me to think about power and historically who has had it and who has not had it. Calls me to think about representation, who has been and who has not been in the room. Calls me to think about vision and direction regarding where we're going as an art and design community. It calls me to think then about community writ large, collectivism, which we all work towards, and in particular, calls me to think about, given that we're 6 women leaders, self-actualization and power. So we're going to address some topics: groundwork, what do we do, the cost of women's work, visibility, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to dig into some questions and just ask these folks to talk a little bit about what they do. So the question is, what do you do, beyond what I just said in the intro, and how does your definition of community and power influence that work? Dejha?
Thank you, Crystal, and thank you, everybody, for joining us. 5:30 crowd, this is amazing.
Yeah.
So, as Crystal mentioned, I'm co-founder of an organization called Commissioner. And what Commissioner does is it helps people collect art and support artists in their cities. We do this in a few ways. One, by pooling our members, pooling our memberships so that we can collect together and acquire artwork in ways that we would not be able to do alone. We also do a lot of storytelling to redefine who a collector gets to be, what collecting looks like, and who could afford the work. And then we also do a lot of programming to pull back the veil on the artistic process, to be able to really recognize what creative labor is, the time it takes, what art making can look like for certain artists, but also to introduce people to collector homes. We often have this idea that a collector home has to be large, expensive, something out of touch, when in fact collecting has happened in many ways across many generations for many decades, across all cultures. And so we're really trying to think of the periphery as being the center and there being many centers. And I think that's really where collectivism and power comes from us. Often when we think of a membership program, we think of something that's exclusive, points, perks, VIPs. What if membership was really a way of providing access and knocking down doors for everybody else? What if the thing about membership is that you can buy into something, and because you have the means to buy into something, you can open more doors for everybody buying in, and then you can make sure that those doors stay open for other people to follow. And I think that's really the inspiration behind the program, and really the way that we're trying to reframe this idea of power and influence.
Trevyn, when we talked originally, our group, I was interested in the reframing, the very gentle reframing you did. So South Africa and your gallery, the way you think about community differs from the way we originally were talking about it, and maybe sort of ties into what Dejha was just talking about. So can you tell the people what it is that you do and how community informs that, or vice versa?
Yeah, so I think, the question was, how are you, is your program informed by community? And what we kind of came to mind was the fact that our community is what informs our program. So it's a flip, and it's the other way around. That really we came to this concept of presenting work from people that we were personally inspired by and that we just wanted to hang out with and that we wanted to make family with. And 16 years later, here we are presenting a lot of those artists that we began working with. Some of them are here with us today. And we really are family, and we're stronger for being together. And things wouldn't exist without one element of that family member being there. So the idea of Southern Guild is that it is a guild of people who are like-minded and who strive for excellence and who want to preserve traditional ways of thinking and of doing things. And we stand in a circle with our artists and with our supporters and with our collectors, hopefully, and definitely with our team. So it's not a hierarchical system. We're not making all the decisions as founders. We are very kind of democratic and egalitarian, and we try and propel and create fusion through introduction and relationships, and together we feel that we can bring something of meaning into the world that has lasting value.
Thank you. So Dominique, that calls me to ask you to talk a little bit about what it is that you do, how community informs that, and how power and gender informs it.
I
think,
can you hear me?
Can you all hear her?
Well, I'm the co-founder of Limbo Accra, which is a spatial design practice that originated in Ghana, West Africa. And essentially, we operate in the ruins of unfinished architecture, unfinished real estate projects. And oftentimes, when people think of the built landscape or the built environment in Africa, they think of it as a place of scarcity. There's nothing there, and there's this need to build new and improved structures, where in reality, there are a lot of structures there, they're just not finished. So we try to work within that realm of liminality, that realm of limbo, which is the title of our studio, and find ways of empowering people, communities, and creatives in terms of honoring these spaces, but also reviving these spaces for creative reuse and alternative reuse. So that's our power in that sense of being able to find transformative means of engaging with these spaces and transformative ways of reimagining what these spaces can exist as in terms of benefiting our communities and our needs. And of course, we're creatives, we love to work within the arts, but there's real needs on the continent that requires, certain solutions. And we believe that these spaces that are unfinished has the potential to transform them.
Thank you. Lora, I feel like that sort of draws us directly to the broad kinds of work that you undertake. So can you just sort of paint a picture of the breadth of work that you undertake, why, and how gender is informed by that?
Thank you. I'm a designer, I'm a curator, and I'm an advocate for female-identified persons and families. Most of my work has really centered around the family structure. With my gallery, Kinder Modern, it was really about bringing the idea of children into the world in a cool and creative way, and also dealing with what I was dealing with at the moment. As far as working and focusing my efforts on working with female-identified makers, creators, artists, and architects, community is everything in this business. And I feel like one exchange, one connection, one act of kindness, one inquiry can really set an entire path for a creative person. We hear often in schools and in kind of closed off environments, for lack of a better word, not relating that to the school environment, that someone having an opinion, being negative or against the path that you're on, can really change the trajectory of an artist. And it certainly did that for me in my career. And so I've made it my effort to ensure that women have a path to go on, that we connect with one another, that we build upon each other and the work that we're doing, and that we bring our power together. I started Female Design Council about 5 years ago. The idea happened a little before we really got things off the ground. And in that time, the amount of intellectual capital, connection, love, and power that has grown out of that community has forever changed me and is really what carves the path for where I go next. So many people in this room are supporters of the work that we all do, and it's a real testament to this fair that we're all up here, and that's what I'm about.
Thank you. Cristina, so I have been struck in the conversations that I've had over the past day and a half or so by how many people know and respect you and the work that you have done over the decades. And I'm interested if you just tell folks, talk with people about what that work has been and how you have thought about gender in leadership throughout that multi-decade career.
Thank you. Honestly, even though I have an expertise in 20th century design, when the 21st century was coming around, I was very curious and very eager to be part of the movement of the 21st century. So this is why I decided to open my own gallery. And even though my collection in the beginning was, well, in the beginning I was advising clients on their collections. Slowly, people started calling me and asking me to do things and to represent them. But one of the biggest gifts I received was when Jorge Lizarazo from Hechizu, as a Colombian woman, and for me, one of the things, Crystal, that is the most important, and I think for all of us, is to be authentic, is to be honest as to who we are. So for me, as a Colombian gay woman, I just didn't think about it. I just decided I'm just gonna focus on my talent, on my knowledge, on my intelligence, and let's make this happen, because that's how I want to be seen. So when Jorge Lizarazo from Hechizu, which is a Colombian textile company, came to visit me, I was really taken with his work. And this is when Colombia was in very bad shape. And nobody was going to Colombia. It was a very dangerous place. So when he asked me to represent him, I was a little scared because I didn't know how to work with contemporary textiles. But I said, okay, I learned. And once I saw his work, I was completely in love with it. So I decided my journey, first of all, I felt that Jorge had given me that love again of Colombia and Latin America. I kept thinking, how can I work with Latin America? But I needed that sophistication, I needed the execution, I needed the knowledge. And when he came to see me, I felt, okay, this is the way to do it. And my job, Crystal, is education. How can I tell my clients, please consider Colombia. Please consider these weavings. Please remember that the kumare, Crystal de kumare, is planted by women and collected by women. And basically, and you know this, is telling the story. I wanted to tell my clients the story. Think about all the people that made this atelier. Let's work together, let's do it. And that's how, you know, it's part of my collection, and I think it's been a wonderful journey to work with the Hechizu.
So that gives me, I mean, that leads us beautifully into the next question, which is, or actually not even a question, just an opening, a conversation about the labor of women. What is visible and what is not, and what are the costs of the labor of women. Who wants to jump in? Not everybody has to answer, but if somebody has a burning desire, jump on in.
Okay, so I think that in addition to, this is adjacent to labor, but it really, women are traditionally looked at for their procreation and not the merits of the actual work and craft. And it's a double-edged sword, the craft conversation, because obviously craft has been this real kind of underpinning of women's work. But I feel like we haven't been given our due from a century perspective, right, of the work that we do outside of the home. And there's so much hidden work that we have to do in order to balance both if we are parents, and not everybody becomes a mother, et cetera. And so I'm talking about this from a little bit of a different angle than what you're asking, because I think that there's a lot of hidden layers in what women have to do in order to balance both sides of work and home. And we're not paid the same for it. We often have to pay more by sacrificing our own professional choices. So I think there's a lot of different layers of costs that come up in what it takes to be a working woman or working female-identified person. And I think that we're just now, these conversations are becoming extremely pertinent and critical to looking at how we change this and how we move forward and how long it takes to really get anything done.
So, Trevyn, I see you going, this reminds me, however, when I talk to my HR department, right, we've got a sort of pay equity law that's come into, right, the system. And so it's relatively easy if you've got administrative assistant number 3 versus administrative assistant number 3 to figure out pay equity when the jobs are the same, et cetera. Completely difficult to do, not even a conversation to have really in the realm of art and design, where there is no easy comparison. So I'll stop talking, but it sort of annoys me. So Trevyn, what were you going to say?
I was just going to agree with Lora that how do you reframe the importance of what, where I come from, and with the work that we do, there is so much that is taken for granted of the women that look after families and what they need to do to just keep the day-to-day going, and then alongside that to try and bring money into the family or to have any kind of career. And I think it is only through reframing the importance of what they do from a craft perspective, but also from a making or artistic, but also really honoring those day-to-day tasks. And that's something that we do try to address. Izzy Poposwa's got works on our booth here, and a solo show in April in New York showed that it was the pillars of the nation, the women that carry the load physically and metaphorically, are honored in her work. So the films that she made, the photographs that she took of herself back in her home village, was to say these day-to-day activities, fetching water, carrying food, carrying firewood, are actually worthy of being sculpted and represented in bronze and revered for all times, because these are the activities that really matter.
Dejha.
At the University of Miami, Dr. Sophia George studies stress on Black women.
Yes.
And the acceleration of weathering and the deterioration of health on Black women, because not only are the day-to-day tasks, but there is this environment and this oxygen in which we all breathe, which is capitalism and racism and supremacy. And so when we think about that toxicity and how it often materializes, I'm reminded of the teachings of Tricia Hersey, who thinks about rest as resistance and rest as a political act. How could we become escape artists and escape this idea that we only exist as products of labor, and detach ourselves from the to-do list and stop thinking ourselves as these people who can do a lot simply because we have done a lot? And while, this comes from the teachings of Tricia Hersey, we are all impacted by this.
And can you just open up a little bit? In what way do you see that we are all impacted? So unpack that a little bit.
Well, we all participate in this economy together. And so you send me an email at 11 o'clock at night, I reply at 11:02. You want to be polite, so you reply back to me. And then I want to make sure that per my email, you got this attachment, and there we go. And we start accelerating and start pushing each other further and further. And because we are women, often, well, I won't speak for everybody. Sometimes one may feel like they need to show the proof of the work in the hours that they put in, or at the times that they stay late at the office, or by the things that they're giving up, and also by the sacrifices we're making. And when we start, I think, participating in these ways where we're trying to prove our productivity in that kind of way, it can create a toxic work environment. And I think that's the toxicity that keeps on perpetuating. It's a hamster wheel that never stops.
So I would also add to that some of this conversation depends on how we define labor. So if we define labor as strictly being in relation to a paycheck, that's one kind of work. But there are other kinds of work that happen in our everyday lives, right? So I was talking the other day, I have a very dear neighbor who is 82, and she wanted to know from me, we were talking about, she's Jewish, and we were talking about what is happening in that region of the world. And she turned to me and asked me about being a black woman and the weight of that, like what more I carry. And so I started sort of outlining to her the kind of time that I take in thinking about, where are you going today? How do you mitigate hostile eyes on you? How do you ensure that police aren't going to stop you? How are you going to code to tell people you belong here so that you don't get followed? Like all of these ways in which my mind, I'm exerting energy, right? Which is a kind of work. So there are multiple levels of work, and I just talked about race, but there's also culture. So I think about folks who, I just flew here from Seoul. There's a kind of labor energy that I'm expending when I'm walking along the streets of Seoul and don't have the language. And I think about people who are visually impaired and what kind of labor it takes to have them move through the world, right? The expenditure of energy. So if you map onto that gender, race, culture, all of the things, then we begin to see differences, I think, in outcomes. All right, so I'm gonna move to the next question, which has to do, again, with labor, but here almost exclusively in terms of art. So Venice last year, I was struck by this. I was struck by it again here, walking through Design Miami, and also through Untitled, the amount of textile work that I see. Gorgeous, unbelievable textile work. I got so excited. Well, we have a textile department, so I was taking photos for the students, so they could see. But also, just extraordinary work, but work that has traditionally been understood to be the work of women. And I'm interested in your folks thinking about, what does that mean if we think about the way power works right now in art and design? Who gets elevated and amplified? Is this a new opening, a new way for women to move into pay equity and less labor, different labor, So I'm going to open the question. Dominique, do you have a way of thinking about this?
I think for me, just hearing your question, I'm reflecting on a recent exhibition that we just had the pleasure of doing in Sharjah, the Sharjah Architecture Triennale, which is what you're seeing here. And as I mentioned, we operate in these large, brutalistic spaces that are unfinished. And we had the opportunity to do so in Sharjah in the UAE. And coming from a West African context now in the Middle East, it gave me the opportunity to not just connect with local Emirati women, but also women from the Asian region, let's say South Asian region. And from the onset of our invitation of participating at the Triennale, we knew we wanted to intervene within this large structure that is of actually like 64,000 square meters in a soft and impactful way. And so we thought that the best way to do so was to work with fabric and find ways of not just allowing that fabric to exist in the state that we designed for this Triennale, but also in its afterlife. What does that look like? What does that fabric then be repurposed into after this installation? And so we collaborated with a Ivorian textile designer, which then we collaborated further with a collective of women in Karachi, Pakistan, actually, that worked with us in the actual manufacturing of our design. And to answer your question with regards to is textile the way forward in being able to activate or being able to engage with territories or spaces that are deemed maybe largely masculine or whatever the case is, I think so, at least with my recent experience. And I think the materiality itself, as malleable as it is, allows for that flexibility in it being able to form or manifest in different ways that we know or may not even know, and allowing for a collaborative effort in not just the manufacturing of it, but also the realization of what it could be. So yeah.
Cristina, you work with collectors. Are you seeing, it just occurs to me, are you seeing more women collectors coming into the space? I know I've gotten off of that question. I'm going to come back to the question. It just occurs to me that you might be seeing more advocacy in relation to collecting, which might inform the market.
Couple of things. The first thing is craft that we've been talking about. Craft has had in the past, kind of a demeaning significance. But I think that right now, when you talked about maybe craft having an opening, I think that perhaps now, with all the representation, like you said, all the textile representation in all the fairs, I think textiles are having a resurgence. And I think not just, so before, if it was just associated with women, now men are also doing textiles. And I think that just the fact that now both male and female are doing textiles is kind of bringing the textile world to a different level. And I think that, I was thinking about the title of our talk. And I think it's beautiful because it's our story, our voices, and how can we use our power through all the work that we have done for the past few years. How can we affect change in our own little way? And I think that we have to use our power because we have it, and we can really impact. I mean, all these women are really accomplished, so we can really help our community, we can really help our artists, we can really help our families with the knowledge and the power that we have acquired in the past few years.
Thank you. Lora?
I just wanted to mention that I think the lens has opened up, right? If this craft, different craft works have been done for thousands of years, they were seen in a very particular way, which is what you're saying. But I also think that women have been working in so many different capacities, in so many different materials, in so many different ways, and we're now just having light shown in a very more pointed way towards that work. I also think that there's a simplicity to the soul maker that makes it more accessible to all. And just was a point that came up for me. Sometimes you can be the most creative person in the world and you have ideas, but how do I execute in a simplistic, cost-effective way? And I do think that the act of weaving is a very personal, can be controlled and can start in a small way and build. And so there's a real arc to that growth. So just a point.
Interesting. Trevyn.
But can I say something that you asked me before? I do have a frustration with the lack of women collectors. I do wish that we had more women collectors. And a lot of our clients are interior designers and architects, and many of those clients are men. So as a woman, I'm always hoping to have more women interior designers and architects come into our spaces and collect their pieces. It is a frustration I have.
Yeah, Trevyn, thank you.
I agree with you. But I was going to go back to just what we were saying earlier. I think the idea, the reverence that craft is receiving is really fantastic, because what it's doing, I'm just thinking of something like basket weaving, for example, this skill that gets handed down empirically from generation to generation, that women who might leave their communities to go and look for work somewhere else, if they're called back to create something that is in their DNA and has been part of something that has been so important to their ancestors, that is now being revered properly, the level of pride and commitment to continuing that lineage and continuing that preservation is so important, because it's gaining recognition and commercial success through something that really is owned by that community. And that, I think, is critically important for sustainability and the opposite of this fast, just moving through a disposable world.
Thank you. I want to turn to a question about effective interventions. So this is a community of people in this audience. There are collectors, there are artists, there are gallerists, there are curators. So it's a broad diversity, right? And it might be nice to hear about some effective, that you all have experienced, interventions that have increased representation, advancement, or the success of women artists and designers that might be able to be duplicated. So what have you seen that's been working so that these folks we can plant seeds and they can go out into the world and water them?
Well, I would say from where I at least started my practice and where my roots come from in Ghana, West Africa, what we're seeing is a renaissance of some sort. What we're seeing is a resurrection and a rejuvenation of traditional culture, which is now being translated in a contemporary format. And in terms of active interventions and what could be a takeaway from this is, what I'm noticing is that people are literally just using what exists, and are using the materials, they're using the knowledge, and they're using the resources that are in their proximity in their given environment. And I think having grown up in New York and coming from a place of excess and so forth, seeing how far you can get with utilizing the potential of what already exists can go ways that are unimaginable. And I think from my practice, that's kind of where I've gotten inspiration in terms of, again, utilizing unfinished real estate or utilizing unfinished architecture as a form to be able to develop and to be able to continue the legacy or heritage that exists within our given environment. And I think that resourcefulness is something that's inherent to us as a people, and that can also go a long way.
Good, thank you. Others?
In thinking about this question and also our previous question, I think about April Bay, who has created an equity in collecting program. And essentially what that program asks is it asks folks who identify as being women or femme, who are working mothers, who are part of the queer or LGBTQIA community, plus community. It just asks people to identify from different groups. And based on that, you may be able to apply for a piece of artwork or to qualify for a piece of artwork. And that artwork is subsidized by the gallery. So if you become part of the Equity Collector Program, maybe your piece from April Bay is $500, but another collector is sponsoring the balance of $4,500 and is doing it in conjunction with the gallery and also in collaboration with other collectors. April Bay uses textiles. Her material is de facto one of collective weaving. And so to have an artist like that thinking about ways to have more women, to have more educators, to have more folks who exist on the margins of the economy participating, acquiring, and owning the work, I think is hugely important.
Other interventions that you've seen?
I wanted to share, which I shared a little bit with you, my experience as a Colombian woman. Let's go back to education and how pieces are presented. So for 2 years, I worked on an exhibition in the Museum of Modern Art of my hometown in Pereira, which is in the coffee region of Colombia. And Colombia is a country that hasn't had a lot of experience showing art, architecture, and design at the same time. Like we see here, and we've done it for many years. For us, I've done it since I opened my gallery, but it's something that it doesn't really happen in our countries. I don't know, usually people tend to be rather conservative. So I had this idea to introduce design and architecture in a museum of contemporary art in Colombia. Actually, Chris, my dear Chris here, he actually participated in the exhibition. And the impact that we had was extraordinary. For people that had never seen a chair or a coffee table or a chandelier in an art museum was extraordinary. I think I shared with you that within a month, 7,000 students had seen the exhibition, 40,000 people from the general audience, 500,000 people had seen the exhibition online, unheard of. And this is the kind of work that we need to do. It was a multi-diverse exhibition. Everybody was, the people from all these different 6 states that we invited to participate, there were all kinds of different regions, different pieces, and it was really transformational. So I feel that the impact that this exhibition had was completely tangible, to the point that a week ago in Colombia, the art fair, they had a new design section, and all these other design platforms are giving themselves the space to exist and to empower the communities around them. So for us was very beautiful.
I would say, as an intervention, invest in yourself as a woman, as a female identified person, invest in female-made artworks and works in general. And part of that is unearthing. It's really digging beyond the obvious. I travel the world and go to design fairs, and I was really struck by a lot of the main big shows, not necessarily the satellite shows, how many are male-driven. And I felt like I'm going to all these incredible studios. I know the work is there. And so it takes a little bit extra effort to really dig in and learn about what's happening, and that affects your own work. And then it affects how you learn to collect. And so I feel like we all have that power in our small communities, and we can bring that to a larger audience.
Thank you. Trevyn.
In thinking about that question, I just became very aware that currently we've got 3 artists who are making very large-scale bronze works, and they're going into foundries that are run predominantly by men and who are domains of men, because those kinds of sculpting, where we are, has been very male-led. And these women are rock stars in those spaces, and the guys who are making for them are seeing them not only as artists who are coming in, but they're having to shift their perspectives, and they're really excited by what they're doing, and they're wanting to make them good and make the artist happy, and that really feels to me like a shift in how we can not assume there are places we can't go, and to claim them and to be heroes within those spaces. And I think that shifting just in those ways can really make a difference to the way that art is produced.
So I'm so appreciative of your collective wisdom on this point. There are a couple of other things that I've seen. So for instance, last year, or actually earlier this year, the New York Appellate Court, well, I guess maybe several years ago, the chief judge of that court undertook a project to, there are statues on the very top of the roof of that building. It's on the corner of Madison Square Park. And all of the statues are male. And so they, as an organization, had undertaken a question, a sort of equity and inclusion question. And she decided to include art in that question. Right? What is being represented in this building? What do we have power over? And so she realized, well, those are all men up there. And so they commissioned one of our alums, Shahazia Sikander, to create this incredible bronze that now is sitting up at the top of the New York Appellate Court on the corner of Madison Square. Right, so it's self-empowerment, questioning, asking about representation, and then wherever you can, right, inserting the value and demanding the outcome for greater representation, wider doors, bigger apertures, et cetera. In our museum, for instance, we've taken a deep look at our collection and have made commitments about our acquisitions, right, in terms of who is underrepresented and who is not. And if we want to be a museum that is going to be relevant in 10 years, 20 years, 100 years, we want the museum director in 100 years to look back and say, thank you, museum director from 2023, for asking the question and setting us up for success, because the world today is much different than your world was, and you had the foresight. So I think that there are structural questions that all of us can be asking in every one of our domains. And I think there are spiritual questions, right, and moral questions for us to ask in terms of how we engage in what it is that we do. And I think all of those collectively amount to significant change that doesn't actually have to take 50 years. It can actually happen in 10 years. So I'm going to open this up to, well, I have a question about joy. And what brings you all joy? But I'm also going to open it up to the audience. So chew on joy. Does anybody in the audience have a question for these incredible humans? Really? I think they have you all hit a wall? There's a question.
With all the incredible labor and support and work you do, what is it that keeps your commitment to rising?
What a great question. Who wants to take it?
I feel like I have no choice. It's, I feel very driven from the inside to ensure that I have a powerful connection with those that I work with and those that I'm inspired by, and that there's a legacy in that of what you leave behind. That magic connection, that spark, which sparks joy, to sort of take that back, is really critical to my practice, and community is part of my practice. And so I think it is part of all of our practice, and I love that question because I think it really is indicative of the drive, like pushing yourself further than you think you can, and continuing to just work harder and do better.
It's a fascinating question. I know I'm not on the panel, but I will answer it. I don't actually aspire to greatness for myself or to rising for myself. I aspire to be of highest service to others. And I feel so honored to be in the position I'm in because I can't even begin to tell you how deeply I believe how necessary artists and designers are. And so to be able to work, to amplify them, to get out into the world and help make it better, right? So it's not actually I'm not all that ambitious for myself, but I do have ambition for the world. Yeah, what about you all? Dejha.
Yeah, I would echo that sentiment, but also I'm in it for the stories. I feel so privileged and grateful to meet such incredible artists who are taking the time and doing the work and who have such a sense of curiosity and a deep well of knowledge that I feel compelled to bring it to the fore and share that with everybody I know. You know, I think it's the passion for creating connections around common experiences and maybe underrepresented stories that motivates me.
I agree with you. I want to do the best work that I can for my designers and artists and try to make sure that they can fulfill their dreams.
I think that's what makes Design Miami quite a unique space, actually, and different to other fairs, because I do think, actually, that all of the gallerists here share a commonality in that, and I think that's why they're so supportive of each other. And they'll take collectors to each other's booths, and the artists will talk to each other, and there's this sense here of what this talk is about, the fact that this talk is even happening, the sense of community and purpose. And Delia and I were talking this morning to a journalist, and we were saying that between us there is this calling. You know, and it's a collaborative calling for all of us to achieve what we're setting out to do. So it's not an isolated, ambitious, singular thing. It's a collaborative, calling.
Dominique, you are the only voice who has not spoken on this particular question, which is a good question, so I want you to add your voice if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I really just resonate with everyone here and everyone's individual perspective on this collective, innate calling to be able to just do what we do. And I think that's just the power of being a woman and being able to work in community and in service of others. So, yeah.
All right, I'm on Joy again. Joy.
You know, I like hanging out with my friends.
Right.
No, I think it comes down to that.
Yeah.
Spending time with the people that you care about, and sometimes being able to do the simple acts of service that bring collective happiness.
I'm going to ask more Joy, but are there any other questions here? Anybody else have a question? Okay, Joy, Trevyn?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what we're just all saying. The real joy comes from when there is acknowledgement from the outside world that what you're doing counts, and success for the people that you care about the most. And luckily my I work with, there's 3 of us from my family already, and I'm trying to get the rest in, because then we're sharing in that all together. So I'm doing it with the people I love the most. Yeah.
What about the rest of you, Joy?
For me, we just finished, 3 weeks ago, we set up the Hechisu exhibition. Is talking about the story. We decided to tell the story of the Garden of Eden through textiles. And I was so overwhelmed when I came in for our opening that I burst in tears. I just think it's truly an extraordinary exhibition. And it's the story of the original sin, and it's a multi-dimensional exhibition. And the joy that I felt made me cry.
What about you?
Well, Joy happens to be my middle name.
Oh.
And that's a little side thing there, but no, really. Joy for me is directly connected to inspiration. And just like all of these women here have been communicating about, I'm so inspired by the artists I get to work with, by the friends that I get to collaborate with, by the people that support the work that I do and support the organization that I feel so lucky to run. It really fills me with so much joy and love and honestly power. Like the collective power of connection really trumps everything, and it's generationally passed down. And so I get to further inspire my child, who hopefully will do the same, and it seeps into all those areas.
I love these answers. I think I'm going to answer my own question, which is, there are two. One, dogs. And I really love dogs. And
do you have a dog?
alas, no. It is a great sadness. It is a deep, deep sadness. I travel and work such long hours, and I think dogs deserve more than I have to give at the moment. So dogs is one, but also self-actualization, true self-actualization, where you understand yourself to be doing the thing that you can uniquely do in service of, insert whatever, is joyful. It's right, it's a constant state of joyfulness. Even when folks are sort of getting on your nerves and things are not working and there's a flat tire and all of that, there's still a sense of joy. Did everyone answer that question?
No. No, but I was going to simply put it as being present is really my act of joy. Being able to like ground myself and root myself in a present state is what brings me joy, and checking myself in that moment.
A last question before we leave. Not everybody has to answer it, but these good people have come and spent an hour with us. What is a thing that you want them to leave here and carry with them in relation to women and rising together? Is there anything you want to just, don't leave here without thinking about it? Yeah.
I would say that there's a power in all of us. And I think that's something that's beautiful about being a woman, knowing what that power is and being able to, act on that calling. And, it's a gift that we have, and it's a gift that can also be shared. So yeah, I take that as an antidote to be able to go out in the world and do whatever you do and whatever you feel called to.
Well, thank you.
I would say don't be afraid, take risks, go for it.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I think we have the natural inclination at times to hide and to not be loud and bold and strong. And when you're afraid of something, you should step into it and not be afraid to find your power at any time of life. I think age is just a number, and it's really critical to step into whatever it is that inspires you when you're ready, or maybe even when you're not ready.
I think a lot of imagination as a radical act of freedom. So I invite everybody to just imagine and then go ahead and do it.
I don't have anything to add.
Yeah. I want to thank all of you for joining us at 5:30. It has been my honor to be in conversation with the five of you. Thank you very much for the work that you do in the world, and for opening up so many doors for so many others. Thank you.